So Lightfall has just dropped, and on March 10th, so will the new raid. This is my favourite time to be a Destiny player, as raiding is my favourite thing to do in D2, and the unique challenge a day 1 raid brings is not a feeling I can find anywhere else. I love this time around the game, so today I'm super excited to talk to you about loadouts, guns, and mods I'm planning on bringing with me into the day 1 raid. I want to preface this by saying this is all just my opinion, and if I don't mention a gun or a mod setup here you think is good, that does not mean I think it's bad. It probably just doesn't fit my personal playstyle, but that does not mean it's not a viable option. It's also worth noting that the raid is going to be capped at 1780, so anything you plan on bringing into the raid should be 1780 at the minimum. We are going to start off by talking about what I deem essential weapons to bring into the day 1. These are guns that I reckon will be your best in-slot options for any challenge the raid brings you, and will be what I will be taking as my first option for most encounters. Starting off in the kinetic slot, we have Witherhoard. I feel like I don't really need to tell you why this gun is one of the best options to bring into day 1. It's a jack of all trades, great ad clear, great damage, great ammo economy, rolls any challenge you give it basically. You can't really go wrong with this gun, and it's a lot of people's default pick for a reason. Following up Witherhoard, we have Izanagi's Burden. Izzy's is also a very versatile weapon, not as much as Witherhoard, but it has multiple uses and the instant high damage it brings to the table is hard to find outside of the heavy slot. It's great for taking out high threat targets or hot swapping in the DPS phase, and is a solid weapon to have ready for day 1. My next pick is going to be a Stasis Fusion Rifle. These are great for any enemies you cannot crit but need to deal high damage too fast. These weapons melt enemies without needing to be too precise, giving them amazing ease of use. You can also bring one with Chill Clip for crowd controlling high threat targets, but I'll get onto some better crowd control options in a little bit. For rolls, I'd look for Hammer Forged Rifling or Extended Barrel in column 1 for more range, Liquid Coils in column 2 for more damage, Auto-Loading or Field Prep in the 3rd for more ammo and easier reloads, and Vorpal or Chill Clip in the 4th for damage or CC. I'd also run with a Reload Handling or Range Masterwork, whichever you prefer. I find Riptide is the easiest to use, and also has the highest DPS due to it being a rapid frame, but the other options I like is the Ore Vandal, which gets a great roll of Reconstruction and Chill Clip, giving it a stupid amount of Chill Clip shots. Riptide is focusable from Shax and drops from the Crucible, while the Ore Vandal is a world drop. For the first primary on my list, Submission is going to be my go-to if I need to free up my energy slot for a special weapon. SMGs do some of the best DPS and damage out of all primary weapons, making them feel amazing and great at clearing ads. They are my comfort primary, so I'd say you can easily substitute this out for whatever primary you enjoy the most. The role I like is Hammer Forged Rifling in the 1st for range, Accurized Rounds in the 2nd also for range, Subsistence and Overflow in the 3rd so I don't have to reload as much, and Frenzy in the 4th due to the reload speed and damage buff. I like a range masterwork on SMGs, but take what you like. Next up, I'm going with Outbreak Perfected. This is my old reliable for primary weapon DPS. It may not be the highest damage, but it's the easiest I find to get going if you have everybody on your team using it. And it can come in handy as a weapon to swap to if you run out of ammo mid DPS phase or don't get enough drops beforehand. For my penultimate pick in the kinetic slot, I'm going with a Blinding GL. The ad clear and CC these bring to the table are invaluable for keeping you and your teammates alive. Even with the reduced blast radius, they still deal great impact damage and can clear small hordes with just a couple of shots. Not to mention they have incredible ammo economy. The role I crafted is Quick Launch in the 1st for better projectile speed, Blinding in the 2nd, Auto-Loading in the 3rd so I can fire and stow it straight away, and Vorpal in the 4th for more damage to bosses and yellow bars. I personally like a Handling Masterwork on my GL so I can equip and stow it faster. There is also a Stasis GL from Duality that you can get Blinding and Chill Clip on, which is an incredible role, so if you fancy that, go and farm Duality for day 1. The other option you have here is Pardon Our Dust, which is craftable and can drop from dares. My final pick for the kinetic slot is Aegis Scepter. This is primarily for double special, but for me, this is the ad clear weapon. Its ad clear potential is just absurd, and it basically replaces your primary weapon in the double special setup due to trace rifles having such good ammo economy. It can also do some solid damage with the alt fire mode, but it's a bit more niche. I'm mainly bringing it for the ad clear. Going into the energy slot, we have another trace rifle, Retraced Path. This gun basically acts as my energy slot Aegis, albeit less potent but still very strong. Again, this is mainly for a double special setup, but could be taken as an ad clear weapon with a primary if you are more comfortable with that. My crafted Retraced has Hammer Forged and Projection Fuse for range, Subsistence for less reloads, and Incandescent for the ad clear. I like a Stability Masterwork on this trace, just because it has a decent amount of recoil. Widely considered to be the best legendary ad clear gun in the game, we have Forbearance. This gun is just a monster at clearing rooms and taking pressure off of you and your teammates, and pairs incredibly well into a double special or primary special setup due to its, again, amazing grenade launcher ammo economy. The role I like the most on this gun is quick launch for the extra velocity, high velocity rounds for reload speed and more velocity, ambitious assassin for less reloads and chain reaction for stupid ad clear. I run a reload speed masterwork here due to the fact your only option is to manually reload the gun. Next up, we have the second primary on the list, the Ikelos SMG. This is my go-to primary for any content due to it being such a nice feeling gun with great damage and perks. It's a very versatile weapon, with its only holdback being it can't do long range. It's one of the only aggressive frame SMGs with anything resembling a stability stat though, so it can push out a little bit over its counterparts. My go-to role is hammerforged and accurized for range, perpetual motion for the reload speed and just to make the gun feel nicer, and frenzy in the fourth as the do-it-all perk with a reload speed masterwork. My next pick is a rapid fire fusion for the energy slot. These pair greatly with Aegers to deal with beefier targets or with any kinetic primary you fancy. Rapid fire fusions have the highest DPS out of the fusions, allowing it to melt any tougher enemies that might pose a threat to you and your team. The rapid fusion I'll be taking is Null Composure, but you can farm for a likely suspect from the Throne World or an iterative loop from Neuroma. For rolls, go check back to the kinetic rapid fusions. My final pick for the energy slot is Trinity Ghoul. It has unrivaled primary ad clear, with the added benefit of having infinite ammo. It's a very safe bet and a great weapon to have on hand for rooms you need to clear fast, or hordes giving you trouble in a pinch. Moving into the heavy slot, we have Hothead. This rocket has a stupid amount of DPS, and has the added benefit of having probably the best perk pool out of any rocket launcher in the game. It's currently farmable by focusing it at Zavala if you have acquired a regular Hothead before, and is worth going for it if you don't already have one. My perk recommendations would be Hard or Quick Launch for velocity, Impact Casing for the direct impact damage, Field Prep for more total damage or auto-loading for hot swapping DPS, and Explosive Light for your damage perk in the fourth, with a velocity masterwork. Staying on rockets, we have Adaptive and Aggressive frames. I find these great for dealing with yellow bars and mini-bosses, and are reliable options for chunking healthier targets. These frames deal 10% more damage than every other rocket launcher frame, and are solid heavy options for DPS and non-DPS encounters. Just don't blow yourself up. The two rockets I'd recommend are Bump in the Night from Season of the Haunted, or Red Herring from Witch Queen if you don't have Bump. Take the same first and second column as Hothead, with Frenzy on both, or Lasting Impression if you want to be a little bit different and quirky. My footnote here is to take one of these as your main DPS rocket if you don't have a good explosive light rocket or can't generate the orbs for the explosive light stacks. The other role you will want is Bump with Chill Clip. This gun basically acts as your team's second support rocket in tandem with Galley, as the Wolfpack rounds it gets from Galley freeze the target in one shot, allowing your team to shatter the freeze for insane rocket DPS. The meta combo right now of 1 Galley, 1 Chill Clip Bump and 4 legendary rockets is really strong and also really easy to pull off, making it super popular and will be the DPS strategy my team will be defaulting to on day one. The role you will want is again, same as Hothead in the first two columns, then Field Prep for just rocket damage or auto-loading for hot swapping damage, both with Chill Clip in the fourth. Next up we have, oh my god, what a surprise, it's Galley. Even after all the nerfs, this gun is still amazing for clearing rooms and dealing with high health mini-bosses, as well as being half of the puzzle for one of the main DPS strats going into day one. You really cannot fault this gun, and it is an absolute must for any team planning on doing day one. Moving on to swords, we have the Lament. This is the go-to weapon for close range burst damage. It also boasts a stupid amount of total damage for the DPS it outputs, making it incredible to have on hand for if there is a close range DPS encounter that pops up in day one. Staying on swords, my next pick is a legendary adaptive or vortex frame. This is for the same reasons as Lament, but for if you need your exotic slot for something else. Your main options here are going to be the Falling Guillotine, but if you don't have one of those, then either of the Dare swords will do just fine. For sword rolls, you should be looking for Jagged Edge as it provides the most damage out of the blades, Swordsman's Guard as it increases your sword's guard charge rate, Relentless Strikes for the ammo economy, and Whirlwind Blade as your damage perk. My last pick for heavy is almost more of an honourable mention, but I couldn't put it anywhere else. Retrofit Escapade has been one of my default heavies since the release of Lightfall, after machine guns got buffed. I've been using it to deal with basically every type of enemy in the game, due to it having really solid DPS and a stupid amount of total damage with 4th times the charm and target lock. I really have not been able to put this gun down. I know this is way more of a personal pick, but I felt I had to mention it here as my option for when I inevitably start to blow myself up with rockets at the 15th hour in. The role I went for is polygonal rifling for the stability, appendage or extended mag for the bigger mag size, 4th times the charm for less reloads and ammo economy, and target lock as the damage perk. I also took stability as my masterwork, but take whatever you fancy. On to the next section of weapons, we have other good options that have a solid chance of popping up and being useful in the day one. Obviously I don't know what is going to come up in the day one, so I'm trying to cover all of my bases with these weapons and make sure I'm prepared for any encounter. A lot of these options are more fun, and even maybe a little bit whimsical. First option we have for the kinetic slot is Arbalest. The main strengths in this gun lie in its range and ability to break any shield easily, but it can struggle with damage compared to other specials. That's not to say its damage is bad though. Having such good range paired with the ability to effectively have a shield breaking sniper is a good enough reason for me to have this one on power for day one. Next up we have the Huckleberry. I wasn't initially going to talk about this gun until one of my close friends on the raid team I'm running with brought up how much he got out of it for the Val day one. So I gave it another go, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much this thing just shreds through red bars. It's a great ad clear primary if you don't like reloading and are a fan of SMGs. Following up the Huckleberry, we have the Verglass Curve. Honestly, this would have gone in Essential if it had been in the game longer and I had more time with it, but I can't fully put my recommendation to it, so I'm going to keep it here for now. Being able to just freeze an enemy whenever you want with no worry about using an ability for it is really nice. The CC and ad clear this bow brings is really strong and feels like a slightly more crowd control based Trinity Ghoul. Next on the list we have Succession. Snipers are, to be fair, not in the best spot, but that does not mean they're bad either. They are in some odd little middle ground where they are usable and are a good safe ranged option while getting outperformed by better weapons in the damage department. They are still great workhorse weapons though, and I find them pretty fun to use. Another sniper option a fair amount of people like is Thoughtless, which is a craftable stasis sniper from Season of the Risen. So you could also take that if you don't like the heavy feeling aggressive frame of Succession. Like Thoughtless, Succession is also craftable from farming the Deepstone Crypt Raid. For rolls on Succession, I take Fluted Barrel for handling, Extended Mag to allow reconstruction to, well, reconstruct more, as just mentioned, Reconstruction in the 3rd, and Vorpal in the 4th for my damage perk. For Thoughtless, I'd take Fluted again for handling, Extended Mag for more damage per mag, Rapid Hit for the reload speed, and either Firing Line for DPS or Focused Fury for dealing with yellow bars and mini-bosses. My second to last pick is going to be Hawkmoon. The main benefit of Hawkmoon is the amount of damage you can deal while not consuming any heavy or special ammo. Landing all the headshots in your mag will give you basically a mini Izzy shot as the final bullet in your magazine. I know a few people who are using it to deal with the Cyclopses on the intro to Master Vogue on day 1, and since it can get a few good consistency perks, it can become quite versatile. For perks, I'd take Hammerforged Rifling for range, Drop Mag because for whatever reason it's the only mag option, Rangefinder for more, well, range, and Smooth or Polymer Grip for stability and handling. My last pick for the kinetic slot is Touch of Malice. This will basically fill the same role as Outbreak but requires a little more coordination to get the most out of. You want 1 or 2 of your fire team firing the Blight at the target every time it's ready, while the other 4 just mouse 1 the same target for optimized DPS. It's not a tall order to be fair, so if you fancy this over Outbreak, it's kind of a pick your poison situation. Just make sure you're in a well. Opening up the energy slot, we have Sunshot. You are going to start to notice a little trend here of exotic weapons that are pretty good at ad clear, but not strong enough to put as essential. Sunshot has some super solid ad clear and is also in general just a really fun gun to use. Shoot heads, big explosion. Pretty simple weapon that does as advertised and does it well. Not a bad option at all. Next up, we have Risk Runner. Again, another really strong ad clear primary, but needs a little more work to activate its perk. If you don't have arc damage from enemies in the raid, you can run an arc subclass and just throw a grenade at your feet to proc the perk, but it's a lot of commitment for a good at best ad clear setup. Following Risk Runner, we have Lawrence Driver. The main thing this gun is going for it is that you can proc a good ad clear from range, making it a safer option for ad clear. The gun also hits really hard per shot, making it double up as a strong option for dealing with mini bosses and yellow bars. Overall, Lawrence is a solid option if you want something safer to deal with ads. My next choice is going to be Divinity. It may have got nerfed, but the crit bubble it creates can be invaluable for some encounters. If you have a boss that's giving you trouble by moving around too much or having an inconsistent crit spot, then Divinity is almost a must and is a really solid weapon to have on power for day 1. Its only downside is you're dropping someone who could be dealing DPS to make it easier for the rest of your team to deal DPS. Apart from that, this gun is great. My final pick for good energy slot options is the Callus Mini Tool. This gun is already very popular, as it's a really nice feeling gun that gets incandescent. This gives it great ad clear potential on top of the fact it's a 900 RPM SMG that already deals good damage. For me, its main downside is that it lacks in the range department, and that is the main reason I like the Icolos SMG over Mini Tool. But it's still an amazing option if you want the extra ad clear. Kicking off the heavy slot, we have the Big Bow, Leviathan's Breath. This weapon has received multiple buffs over the last few patches, to the point where it is one of the highest DPS weapons in the game, which to be honest is just funny. This bow feels like it hits like a truck, and has the numbers to back it up. I'll leave a link to an updated DPS spreadsheet so you can see what I mean. Its only real downside is that it takes a while to pull back even with the catalyst, and some people just don't like the way it feels. This is going to be my go-to weapon for crit DPS after the linear nerfs. Next on the list, we have Sleeper Simulant. Sleeper was the only linear that didn't receive a nerf in Lightfall, and still does really well as a DPS option. Its main drawback is that it has a small mag which lets it down, as you will find yourself reloading a lot during DPS phases. But even with that drawback, it still does amazing total damage and DPS, and certainly makes a good argument to have it on power for day one. Staying on linears, we have Cataclysmic. Even after the linear nerfs, this gun still does great as a total damage option with bait and switch along with 4th times the charm. It still does solid DPS and is a great option to have ready for bosses with large HP pools. For the role, I'd go for Fluted Barrel for stability and handling, Enhanced Battery for a bigger mag, 4th times the charm for the ammo economy, and bait and switch for a 35% damage buff. That perk is just busted. Coming up next, we've got some machine guns. Thunderlord is my first pick due to it being really versatile and benefiting a lot from the recent machine gun buffs. It struggled a little bit for total damage before the buff, but after getting the extra ammo, it does really well. It's a solid option for DPS, dealing with yellow bars or ad clear, and has the benefit of not needing crits to proc the lightning strikes. This weapon is great all round and also pretty fun to use in general. The second machine gun we have is Xenophage. This gun has been the first thing that comes to mind when I think of versatility since I got it, to be honest. If you don't know what to run for an encounter that isn't DPS, Xenophage will probably serve you more than fine with the amount of damage it puts out on body shots, as the gun literally cannot crit. Great option to have ready. To be honest, this next weapon could have gone in Essential, but since only one class can use it, I thought it would be more fair to put it here. Crown Splitter is the best legendary sword on paper over all the other frames, but it is only usable by Titans. This weapon looks amazing and really can fulfill that inner medieval knight fantasy every single person has deep down inside of them. So it being strong is just a bonus. The role I would take is Jagged Edge for the damage, Heavy Guard as again, it's the singular option, Relentless Strikes for ammo, and Whirlwind Blade or Vorpal for damage. Vorpal will be up instantly, but you will get more damage out of max stacks on Whirlwind. My next option for good heavies is Parasite. The main reason I want this here is because of the sheer damage a single shot can put out. You basically get a big screw you worm to throw at any enemy you don't fancy being on the map at any given time, and can also be a really good option for DPS with the damage bonus you get for hitting yourself with the splash damage. My final pick for good heavies is Two-Tailed Fox. The catalyst this gun got from Lightfall made it very, very potent as an option for total damage. It will net you slightly less DPS, but is an amazing option for total damage due to the third rocket from the catalyst jolting the targets it hits, allowing your team to proc it and get some free extra total damage. A very solid gun to have up to power. The final category we have is niche but good weapons and combos. These will be weapons that are theoretically good on paper, but hard to pull off or make work to their potential. Most of these are really fun, but require either a bit of mechanical skill or team coordination to work properly. This section will be less based on slots, but I'll cover the best in slot options and roles. The first pick we have are Slug Shotguns. These weapons were part of a massively strong combo during Season 14 with Breach and Clear, but can also be used to deal with just regular yellow bars and priority targets. My main reason in putting them down here is that they don't have great range, and need good and consistent aim to deal significant damage with. They can still be used for DPS strats, but I'll cover that in a little bit. The slug I'd go for in the kinetic slot is Heritage with Hammerforged for range, Assault Mag for fire rate, Reconstruction for ease of use, and Focused Fury for sustained damage or recombination for burst damage. Next up we have Cloud Strike. This is actually a really strong weapon for DPS, but is currently mainly used in a hot swapping DPS strat that is very hard to pull off well. It's a good gun overall, but isn't as reliable as Izzy's due to it being a rapid frame. So I find it struggles to deal with beefier targets that you have to deal with fast, and is quite ammo hungry too. As much as I hate to put this weapon here, we have the Fourth Horseman. This gun has the second highest DPS of any weapon in the game, but lacks total damage and requires you to be point blank to get the most out of it. I really do love this gun though, and it makes me think about crowning witches in Left 4 Dead 2 with the auto shotguns, and in general, it is a really fun gun to use. Moving into the heavy slot, for my next options we have Anarchy, the other piece of the Season 14 double slug DPS meta. This is down here because pulling off double slugs after the nerf they received is really hard and requires a lot of commitment to good handling rolls and handling mods, as well as a close range boss and solid aim. Anarchy as a whole is also great, but in my opinion falls short due to Wither Horde being an option in the kinetic slot, which allows you to bring a burst heavy as well as a damage over time weapon. The next option we have on the list is Wendigo. On paper this has some of the highest burst damage in the game, but requires a lot of precision with a gun that is not very easy to be precise with. You can run it with Cascade Point and Hot Swap, which is a tad easier to do, but for the explosive light DPS setup you need to generate so many orbs to get optimized DPS that I think it is too much of a stretch to consider an option. I will have one ready for day one in the very rare occurrence that I get the chance to use it, but I feel like I'm kind of just coping at this point. Next up, we have Deathbringer. This gun on paper has some of the highest DPS out of all of the rocket launchers in the game, but is extremely hard to pull off. This is because you need to find the perfect height that the projectiles will deal max damage while also all landing and falling for as little time as possible. As for as long as those projectiles are falling, you are not dealing damage. A great gun on paper, but very hard to do well. The final weapon we are going to talk about today is the Legend of Acreus. This gun on paper is the highest DPS weapon in the game. It also has a really good amount of total damage and can honestly be a solid option for a point blank sword style DPS phase. The main drawback of this gun is that it has terrible handling, but it also requires a pretty intense cycle to deal optimal damage with. It's a great gun, and it's nice to have such a strong option require tech to pull off, but it's quite hard and needs a very specific style of DPS phase to be a good option. I'll leave a link in the description to a GIF of the cycle for optimal DPS. Moving away from weapons for a minute, I'm going to talk about some mods and some of the mod setups I'm planning on taking into day one. Most of these focus around survivability or grenade regeneration to 1, keep myself alive, and 2, clear as many ads as possible while conserving ammo. The mod system is still quite fresh though, so these might change with more time messing around with them, but these are what I have found work best for me in the new system. The first build I'm going to cover here is my grenade build. This will be my default set of mods for any non-DPS encounter. For the helmet, I'm running a heavy ammo finder and an elemental siphon mod. The siphon mod is going to be the same element as my primary weapon, so I can make orbs and get armor charges easier. The heavy ammo finder is to, well, you guessed it, find heavy ammo for me if I run low. On the arms, I'm running double grenade kickstart. Since this is my grenade build, I'm funnily enough running 2 of the mod that gives me grenade energy back when I use my grenade. This effect is based on how many armor charges you have when you throw your grenade, and can be buffed by running more of said mod. A no-brainer for grenade builds. On the chest, I'm running Concussive Dampener and Charged Up. Concussive just reduces AoE damage from ads, and since it's easier for an ad to hit you with an AoE attack, I like this over Sniper Resist unless the encounter has a lot of longer range dudes. You can swap it out for Sniper Resistance if you are getting beamed, but it only reduces damage from enemies that are at least 29 meters away, so keep that in mind before sticking it on. Charged Up allows you to carry an extra armor charge, which will give me back more grenade energy when I throw my grenade. On my legs, I've got Stacks on Stacks, Recuperation, and Innovation. Stacks on Stacks will give you an extra armor charge when you obtain one, allowing you to get more armor charges for less. This is really useful in a build where you will be spending all of them every time you throw your grenade. Recuperation will give you some health every time you pick up an Orb of Power, and since that's the main way to be getting armor charges right now, I don't see any reason not to be running this. Innovation gives you grenade energy every time you pick up an Orb of Power, so you are getting a lot of benefits from getting them. More grenade energy, healing, armor charges, and super energy. Finally, on the Bond, I've got Double Empowered Finisher. I've looked over most of the class item mods, and to me, they seem relatively weak while this mod seems pretty strong. Basically how it works is whenever you don't have any armor charges, if you finish an enemy, it will give you an armor charge. 2 of those mods give you 2, paired with Stacks on Stacks to give you 3 armor charges for finishing an enemy. You can get a max of 4 with this build, so just go pick up an orb and you can get a little under half of your grenade energy back when you throw it. The next setup I'm going to cover is my main DPS mods. This will be the setup I put on for any encounter revolving around killing a boss, but I will still have some mods geared towards general gameplay as most DPS phases also have a good amount of mechanics that need to be cleared to get to DPS. Starting off, we have the helmet. I'm going to be running a heavy finder if I'm not running double special, and a special finder if I am, followed with a scout mod that pairs with the finder to help my teammates with ammo economy. I'm also going to be running Radiant Light as I am the Warlock for my team, so I'll be giving them armor charges for their DPS mods. If you are not on the Warlock, it might be worth running Powerful Friends if you are not casting your super, so you can make sure your Warlock gets charged as well. For my arms, I'll be running double Dex mods for hot swapping, or double loader mods if I'm not. If we are struggling with adds or mechanics, I will swap this out for double kickstart though, just to help me get through the rest of the encounter. For my chest mods, I'm going to be running the same as my default setup, Concussive Dampener, and Charged Up so I can have more stacks of armor charge, so my DPS mods are up for longer. I will also switch this around to either Sniper Resist instead of Concussive if there are a lot of snipers, or both Resist mods if I am struggling to stay alive. For my legs, I'll be running 3 of the Weapon Surge mod corresponding to the damage type of my heavy, or 2 Surge mods and 1 corresponding to the damage type of my hot swapping weapon if I am hot swapping. Surge mods give 10% damage to the element it affects for 1 mod, 17 for 2, and 22 for 3. These are basically old Font of Might, but for all elements and are going to be my default mods for DPS. Looking at this, it's probably a bit overkill unless you have a stupidly long DPS phase, but I guess it can't hurt to play it safe. The final thing I want to mention here isn't really a setup, but the mods I will swap to if I'm struggling to stay alive in any encounter. I'm going to run both Concussive and Sniper Resist on the chest to cover most bases for the damage I'm taking, and stick on Healthy Finisher along with Proximity Ward on my Bond to turn my finishers basically into a pocket of protection for a while, while granting me healing for finishing my enemy. The next thing I want to cover briefly is class exotics. I'm going to just give a couple of options for each class to run as defaults, and DPS exotics that work well in hard and endgame content. Starting with Hunters, we have Omnioculus. This is great for survivability for you and your teammates, as it gives you and your allies damage resist when you turn them or yourself invisible, while also giving you melee energy back for the more allies you turn invisible. This has been a staple exotic for ages, and is a great option to default to on day 1 if you fancy playing Void. Next up, we have Assassin's Cowl. This is a great option for any hunters who are looking to use throwing knives. Being able to play invisibility on any class you like is really nice, and the healing it brings to the table makes it a great pick for any time you are struggling to keep yourself up in an encounter. The DPS option I picked for hunters is Star Eater Scales. This exotic paired with Blade Barrage is the highest damage super in the game. It's almost sort of got a buff with the mod changes being so focused around picking up Orbs of Power as well. This should be something you 100% should have ready for day 1, as it really helps your team clear DPS checks. Moving on to Titans, we have a few neutral game options here, but we are going to start out with the Heart of Inmost Light. Yes, it just got nerfed, but as long as you have a solid armor charge mod build based around your ability or abilities of choice, on top of paying attention to your ability cycling, you will still be keeping your abilities up just fine. Following that, we have a more damage-based option for Ad Clear. Synthesteps pair great with the Solar Hammer and allow you to clear hordes pretty safely and quickly. Not to mention chunk orange and yellow bars with just 1 exotic and 1 melee. You could commit more into this with armor charges and whatnot, but just this alone is a great option. The next pick we have for Titans is Lorelei Splendor. This is a great survivability option for Solar Titans if you are struggling to stay up in an encounter or certain mechanic. You can almost use it as a tank option to challenge mini-bosses by getting them to break your shield on top of them, so you can damage them with a close-range weapon while healing and burning them with your Sunspot. The last option I've got for Titans is Curus of the Falling Star. This will be a great pick if any DPS mechanics allow you to Thunder Crash the boss. That's all there really is to it, just like bonk boss, do good damage. First option we have for Warlocks is Eye of Another World. This is purely because it applies a 50% increase to your basic ability regeneration rate, which is a no-brainer and you don't even have to do anything for it. You just have it. A boring but great option for anyone looking to play mainly around their abilities. My next pick for Warlocks is Boots of the Assembler. If you like playing a more supportive role, then this is a great pick for you. The team sustain and healing these boots throughout at your teammates is lovely, and they will be thanking you for a fair while after you keep them from the brink of death by just casting your rift randomly somewhere across the map from them. A great survivability option for you and your whole team. Another survivability option we have here is Karnsteins. These gauntlets are basically free healing whenever you want it with a double melee Kickstarter armor charge build, although a little more selfish than Boots of the Assembler. I'd argue these are more cool though, and that's way more important. Moving on to a good crowd control option, we have Osmiomancies. Making your little stasis turret army and watching everything in front of you stop firing back is just as fun as it is useful. Stasis Warlock Super is also really strong for clearing ads, so that plays even more into the crowd control setup you can put yourself into while running Osmios. Finally, we have Lunafaction Boots. This is going to be your sort of DPS exotic. Warlocks don't have any great DPS exotics right now, and since well is so important, you really should have a pair of these ready for day 1. They are almost mandatory for good DPS, so there is no reason not to have them. The final thing I'm going to cover is loadouts. This will just be a little section covering what guns I'm pairing with what mod setups and whatnot, and some suggestions as to what are good and bad weapon and mod pairings. My go-to loadout for non-DPS encounters is going to be my grenade mod setup with Witherhoard, the Ikelos SMG and Retrofit, with Felwinter's Helm as my exotic armor. This is mainly a mix of stuff I enjoy using with stuff I think will be useful in the day 1. Felwinter's is here as I am going to be aiming to finish a lot of enemies for armor charges, and since I don't have a blinding GL on, I'll get some CC and add clear from the blinding and debuff Felwinter's applies for finishing an enemy. If I'm struggling for survivability, I will most likely switch to Karnsteins, or if we're struggling with adds, I'll go Osmios. My go-to DPS loadout is going to be the mods I showed earlier paired with Aegis, a rapid-fire energy fusion rifle, and a bump in the night with Chill Clip. Obviously, this is just the default and will most likely swap around to either a Frenzy bump, an Explosive Light Hothead, or Leviathan's Breath if the boss is easy to crit. I have also got a hot swapping setup with a rocket ready, in case we need more total damage, and all loadouts will be paired with either triple elemental surge, matching the heavy, or 2 surge for the heavy and 1 for the hot swapping weapon. I'll also be running either Dex or loader mods for the heavy depending on the situation. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for coming to check out my video, and I really hope it helps you with the day 1 raid. If you found this video helpful or entertaining or cool, then if you could drop me a like, I will be indebted to you forever. I will also be running the day 1 over on Twitch, so feel free to come in and call me a dingus if you fancy it. Best of luck to everyone trying day 1, and I'll see you next time.